My name's Jason Schuster, and I'm a doctor of physical therapy. The epigenome, so things that you do throughout your life. If you exercise consistently and eat well, your genome or your specific DNA is going to be tagged in a way that leads to you being healthier. And those tags on the DNA, not all of them, but a good amount of them are passed on from parents to children. So all of them are passed on, or almost all of them are passed on from cell to cell, right? And again, we're just scratching the surface on this. This is the most up-to-date understanding that I'm aware of. So most of the epigenome, the epigenetic marks get passed on from cell to cell when the cells replicate, and most cells in the body can only replicate a certain time, and then they die and they get gobbled up and new cells get formed, right? If the epigenome is out of whack, those cells and their ability to replicate and their ability to be healthy is going to be compromised, which is going to lead to degradation of health in all ways, shapes, and forms, including mental and physical health. So we're going to get into all of that. Really cool stuff. Okay, so this is a good picture, you guys. This is from the NIH website. They have the most money for scientific funding in the United States. The people that run the NIH should be put on trial for criminal medical negligence because of what they've done in the last 5 years and really throughout the whole history of the NIH. So I really don't like the NIH, but they do have the most availability of funding. So we got to take what we got, right? And we can look at their studies and see if they're lying, which most of them are. But the ones that I've included in here, you guys, I've looked through them myself. They seem to be relatively on par for like actually trying to figure stuff out and not just lying to people, which is what a lot of the studies are. So just real briefly, and we're going to go over this a couple times because it's not super easy stuff to understand. So if you look at this picture on the screen, you look at the little chromosome up there, right? So the chromosome is made up of stuff called chromatin, right? So the chromatin is made up of stuff called primarily it's made up of a bunch of different stuff, but if you want to think about it, histones are the little pizza wedges. So histones are the little triangular pizza wedges in the circle. The nucleosome is that entire circle, right? So the nucleosome is made up of 8 histones. 8 histones come together and make a nucleosome. And then the nucleosome is like, there's a couple of different ways to think about it. I love to fish, so I think about the nucleosome as the spool on a fishing reel, right? So when you wind up the fishing line, it gets wrapped around the reel. That's more or less what a nucleosome does. There's about 6 feet of DNA that need to fit inside something 10 times smaller diameter than one human hair, right? So the diameter of a typical cell is about 7 micrometers. It's about 10 times smaller diameter than a human hair. So in each cell, we need to have 6 feet of DNA rolled up in a way that it can fit into something 10 times smaller than the diameter of a human hair, which is pretty crazy. And then throughout seconds, throughout the day, that DNA gets unraveled and re-raveled and unraveled so different parts of the genes can be read. So if you look at this picture here, if you look at the bottom right 2 histones and nucleosomes, right? So the nucleosomes are the full circle, the histones are the little pizza wedges. If you look at those things, it says DNA accessible gene turned on, the red, right? So that red strand in between the 2 nucleosomes and histone complexes, that is a gene that can actually be read and transcribed and made into a protein. Once it's wrapped around the nucleosome, it's not readable anymore. So the DNA is going through this process on a consistent, like all the time throughout the day, which is absolutely insane. It's getting wound up and rewound, and different genes are being able to express to produce different proteins to do different things, right? So if we have something wrong with us, like a bunch of mental stress or whatever, eating bad food, not exercising, the ability of our genes to wind, or of our DNA to wind and unwind around the nucleosomes and histones get compromised, and certain genes become expressed too often or too much, certain genes become expressed too little, and we get discrepancies in concentrations of minerals and elements and vitamins throughout our body, and it causes widespread destruction. So again, the reason this stuff is so cool to me, or one of the reasons, you guys, is that just because we have a certain genotype does not mean we're going to have a certain phenotype. This is very, very malleable, right? So we know that basically everybody has the same genes. There's like 0.1% of people, 0.1% of our genes are different. And then as far as like significant gene anomalies, that would be things like Down syndrome, trisomy 21, where you have a triplication of the 21st chromosome. Less than 5% of humans, like way less than 5% of humans on the planet have a gene anomaly that more or less guarantees that something is going to be wrong with you, right? So if you look at the obesity statistics, 80%, 79.4%, I believe, of the United States population is either obese, morbidly obese, or overweight. Less than 5% of those people have a gene mutation that more or less guarantees they're going to have a difficult time keeping weight off throughout their life. If you're not in that less than 5%, so 95% of all the people who are overweight in the United States, they all have different ways of expressing the same genes in different combinations or in different orders, but they all have the same genes, more or less. I'm just trying to make it easy to think about, right? And again, we know very, very little about all this stuff, but as far as we understand, and that is what the missing heritability problem was when Mendel and Darwin and those guys, they had an inkling. They knew there was something else aside from the actual DNA that was going on. But back in the 1800s, we just didn't have the technology. So nowadays we have the technology at least to see a lot more than we could about 100 years ago. And we're looking at things and we can see that it's not as much of what the DNA is itself, because surprisingly that's pretty consistent, like extremely consistent across humans. What the major things that make people different from one another is how that DNA is expressed, and that is controllable without screwing around with nuclear material like RNA and DNA in our cells. It's controllable with lifestyle changes, things like diet, nutrition, supplementation. It's really, really amazing what we can change. And again, with our technology today, you guys, we can test and retest and objectively measure what we as individuals have going on and how what we are doing is affecting our health. It's really, really important. The primary reason, again, that nutrition and supplementation make a difference, a positive difference when done properly, is that they affect our epigenome. If we could not affect our epigenome and our epigenetics, we could not change our health in the way that we can so dramatically, right? So you see insanely huge changes, positive changes in people's health just from just from not putting bad stuff in your body and putting the base elements that your body needs. If you can just do that, along with like some very, very minimal exercise and stuff like that, you can massively improve your health. These are things that you don't do on a consistent basis. So the study of epigenetics, like I mentioned, Darwin and Mendel and a lot of these guys had an inkling that there was something missing with the original Darwinism theory, and especially with the neo-Darwinism theory. So this is one of the most important aspects of science. Everybody still, in 2024, the vast majority of people on the planet are taught that you are going to be the way that you are because your genes say you're that way. I mean, it's all over the media, DNA and all this other stuff, like, you know, you messing with DNA programs and changing the DNA structure of things. We are so far away from being able to do that safely with people. But what we do know is that we can change the way that our existing DNA is expressed by altering the environment that the DNA itself is in, right? So if you put the DNA in a good cellular environment inside the nucleus, and you have the proper concentrations of vitamins and minerals and nutrients and chemicals and stuff like that, your genes are going to be expressed in a way that make you healthier.